Good evening. Today is Tuesday, January 10th, 2017. This is the regular meeting of the Rhinebeck Central School District Board of Education. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the December 13th, 2016 regular meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion or changes? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. There's an opportunity for public comment, but we have no public present at the moment. So we'll move on to our annual special education report.
So just by way of introduction, each year for quite a few years now, we have asked our Director of Special Education to join us at a meeting typically in January before the budget cycle really gets revved up, to kind of give us a state of the district special education program. As those of you who've been around the table here for the last couple of years are aware, we've been seeing increases in number of special education students in our district and who are needing reasonably expensive services. So it's a major chunk of the budget. We thought that it would be a good idea for the board to be conversant with the program and be able to kind of wrap their heads around the chunk of our budget that is dedicated towards providing services, most if not all of them mandated by state or federal law to our special education students. So we're happy this year to have our newest Director of Special Education, Emily Davison, with us, and you had a copy of her data set and her PowerPoint in your packets, but she's going to kind of take us through that this evening, and we'll be glad to answer questions as it kind of fits into the time tonight. So Emily, thanks for being with us. So I'll turn it over to you. We're going to move just so we can see and get out of your way.
Well, thank you very much for having me here. It's a pleasure to be with you again. I had the opportunity to visit a board meeting back in September as one of my first introductions to the district. And since that time, I've been visiting classrooms, both inside the district as well as outside the district. I've been meeting with administrators, teaching teams, parents, both formally in CSC meetings as well as informally in personal meet and greets, as well as through some opportunity for parent workshops. So I've had a wonderful opportunity to get to know the Rhinebeck School District, the climate in which I'm pleased to be, the community I'm pleased to be a part of, and the climate that I'm helping to grow and to contribute to being inclusive for all of our students. So the PowerPoint that you have enclosed in your packet is something that I developed in conjunction with the data set that Mr. Fallon mentioned. The data set is something that I use, is a set of data that has been previously reported on in prior years. And so I enhanced that, filled in some gaps in that, making sure that we had all of the data from the last presentation to now, so you have some historic perspective, and trying to think about what types of questions you might be presenting me today. I have some pieces that I'd like to share, but certainly along the way ask your questions, as I know they're out there already, I'm sure. So thank you so much. So I'm going to use, I feel like I have arrived administratively, because I have now a clicker. I am so thrilled. Unfortunately, the laser doesn't work on the screen. I learned that this morning, but that's okay. I'm getting there. So this evening, what we're going to be looking at is we're going to be looking at the special needs population within the Rhinebeck Central School District, the students' needs and the delivery of services. And we're looking at this from a programmatic macro level. We're not talking about specific settings within the district, but more on the macro level, in district versus out of district, large picture pieces. And certainly I can drill down as you need, but I want to start big and then move in as needed. I also want to take the opportunity to look at trends in student population and delivery of service that falls under my umbrella, but is actually not special education at all. And those are trends in the in ELL students, English language learners, as well as in students in temporary housing, those students who are eligible for support through the McKinney-Vento Act. All three groups of students have been impacted in a positive way recently in the last 12 to 18 months in regards to state regulation changes, as well as federal changes that I will be speaking about throughout this presentation. And I think that's an important context because that helps drive our programming and our next steps as we continue to support these students. And then lastly, like I mentioned, what are those initiatives? What are our next steps as a district? And of course, being that this is, I think, less than 6 months on the job for me, a lot of this is me learning about the district and planning and working with all of the constituents I previously mentioned in identifying those needs and working with them to then move us forward. So here we go. What I try to do for us is, because we have two different sets of information, as we look at the PowerPoint, you can see it says please refer to tables 1 and 2 underneath the title. So this is current special education enrollment. And the 124 total special education students are those students that are supported both within the district programming as well as outside the district in CSE recommended placements. So that snapshot, 124, is the number of students who are receiving special education services by the Rhinebeck Central School District. This number and all of these numbers that you will see are taken from the October snapshot. The October Beds Day is the first Wednesday of the month, and that is an important data point for both SED reporting as well as our just internal barometer as one point in time. Of course, things have changed since then. Students have become declassified, students have been found eligible, students have moved, programs have shifted, but we like to use that as one point in time. I cannot speak to the past data, so when you look at the data tables, I'm assuming that we're looking at October snapshot data, but I can't speak to that for all the years going back to 2000. But typically the October snapshot and that moving forward as I continue to visit you annually will be the data point that I will be using. So as I said, we have 124 students in the district, and right now our classification rate is 11.8%. That's up from 11.7% reported 2 years ago. That is certainly less than the New York State percentage, which is it has a 17%, and that has remained consistent over the last 2 years. So our identified numbers, our percentage is less than state averages. Okay.
How about from a local county perspective, where are we currently stand?
I would say, looking locally, I would say we're on the lower end. In terms of students with disabilities, and looking at the classifications, as you may or may not know, there are 13 classifications under which a student may be found eligible to receive special education services under IDEA. As you can see listed, we have learning disability, and those are specific, and the specifications are built within the IEP, so that's reading disabilities, math disabilities, writing disabilities. But in general, 39 students identified with learning disabilities, 37 students identified with other health impairments. Now, other health impairments is an umbrella category that really addresses those students with medical diagnoses that adversely affect their students' ability to attend and participate in the academic and their free and appropriate education in a meaningful way. Then we have autism. Historically, autism is one of those classifications where, as you look at the table, that was one classification that was tracked by my predecessors throughout the years, and you'll see the data table too, that has gradually increased. And what we did is in my office, we reported the last 3 years and for all of the classifications. So you'll see on average, and over the last 3 years, all classifications have remained pretty much stable as we move forward. Then we have speech and language impairment at 12 students, intellectual disability at 6 students, emotional disturbance at 4, and then multiple disabilities, hearing impairment, and TBI, traumatic brain injury. Those we have less than 5 in the district for those students. Other classifications which are not represented here within our district are orthopedic impairment, visual impairment, deaf blindness. But these are the ones that are currently identified in our district. And please feel free to ask questions throughout. And sometimes I speak through using jargon and I forget that I'm an acronym queen and I should read a glossary when I speak. So please certainly stop me if you have a question. Now we're looking at programmatically students within our district who are serving in our in-district programming. So looking at each school, at Chancellor Livingston, we have 36 students, K through 5. At Buckley Middle School, we have 28 students, and at Rhinebeck High School, we have 43 students. And if you refer to Table 3, you'll see that, if you refer to Table 3, you'll see that on average we have between 5 and 10 students per grade is how it averages out. We are graduating in the 12th grade with actually 12 students at this point in time. It was an increase from that 11 that you'll see there, but on average it's between 5 and 10, with 1 student receiving homebound instruction. And then we have a number of, you'll see here, we'll have a number of students who are placed, parentally placed. And now these are students for whom the parents have made a choice to enroll into private schools or homeschool their children. These students who are parentally placed in private schools can receive special education services through the district in which the private school is located. And so that's something that the parent works on with that district of location, and we do interact when informed. We're not unfortunately always told, but that's something that I'm looking to really shore up and make sure that we have a strong understanding of who is receiving services in terms of this group of students who is parentally placed. Yes.
Emily, so if a parent has placed a student in a private school and they can get services from that school, are we also providing services? No. Okay. Thank you.
So likewise, if there's a private school in our district and the student is they're a Red Hook student and they attend our private school in our district, we would be the district responsible for ensuring that student's needs are being met.
Okay.
And that's private school.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Can I ask a follow-up question? By ensuring that they're receiving proper services, is that just evaluating the services that are being rendered, or are we actually billed?
We would actually be delivering the services.
We deliver, okay.
Either through staff members that we have hired or we contract.
Okay.
Good questions. Before I move on, actually, I want to at this point talk about a few different things that have occurred over the last couple of years. Last fall, winter was a busy time in our state and federal levels of education. The Every Student Succeed Act was passed last year. That has implications for students with special needs. New York State, partly in response to that, developed a couple of pieces of information that they released to school districts and have not, and let us sit with and let us kind of marinate with and without next steps. But those two pieces I want to talk about now. One is a memo that was entitled "The Least Restrictive Environment," and the Committee on Special Education is responsible for providing students with services and supports within the least restrictive environment. And that idea being that give them what they need in order to be successful and independent in the general education setting when at all possible. So what they did was they looked at the state ed took an opportunity to look at some of our statewide data and district data from the October snapshot from 14-15, and they looked at 3 broad categories of levels of service, and they looked at what the statewide trends were, and then they created some benchmarks, and they basically rated school districts in these 3 areas. And it's an interesting piece because I've been kind of sitting with it and waiting for something to happen, and there hasn't been next steps from state ed, but I think that this was an important piece for districts to look at because then it gave us an opportunity to see how we're doing in comparison to neighboring districts and against the state averages. So to speak to that a little bit more specifically, what they found and when they looked at these state averages was that across the state, students with receiving special education services who spent 80% or more of their time inside a regular classroom, so that's in the least restrictive environment, showing a lot of time in that regular classroom. About 57% of special education students across the state were in the regular classroom for 80% or more. Okay, so then they created a benchmark. Just so you know, Rhinebeck students were 79% of Rhinebeck students were inside the regular classroom, 80% or more, which was fantastic.
I'm sorry, is that a reflection of the fact that we provide a large number of services, or was it just a random thing that had to do with the population?
It's not random at all. It's showing that the Committee on Special Education in Rhinebeck has a commitment to providing an inclusive setting to students with special needs and providing supports included in those environments so that the student is taking that integrated algebra alongside their general education peers. They may have a resource room to support them, but they're there. We're not necessarily saying, well, since they need that additional support, let's just make a special class. Let's increase the supports and services within that general education class and provide supplemental supports as needed. Another category they looked at is special education students who spend less than 40% of their time in regular education classes. There's a little bit of a gap. I don't know why they looked at the data points like this. But so for special education students who spend less than 40% of their day inside a regular education classroom, 20% of special education students across the state, 20% of students were spending 40% of their day or less inside a regular education classroom. For us in Rhinebeck, and I'm not going to take credit for it, I wasn't here, but for us in Rhinebeck, it was 5%. Just about 5%. So again, showing inclusivity, showing a significant commitment across the district, whether that be administrators, whether that means teachers, whether that means teaching assistants, across all classes, all grade levels, because you cannot get those numbers in one class, in one grade, in one school. It is an entire district commitment to inclusivity. It's remarkable. The third area where and so before I move into the third area, so that speaks to the services that we offer here, and I think it's fantastic. And I'm going to come back to that third area in the next slide, because I think that's a piece that we'll be looking at next. Before I do move into that third area though, I mentioned there were two things that happened in SCD, from SCD that, the winter of last year. The other one was a blueprint, and it was a blueprint of, for special education student success, which had 7 guiding principles. 4 of them were about inclusivity. Inclusivity of programming, inclusivity of targeted supports within the general education classroom, providing scaffolded interventions, both behaviorally and academically. So I feel strongly that that blueprint is something that is very much reflective of what is already happening here in Rhinebeck, which is exciting. So this is the direction that, again, that New York State is going in, and up until, who knows what direction we're going in now, but up until the 20th, we're going in terms of moving towards the Every Student Succeed Act. Okay. So I want to just continue to focus on in-district. In-district, we provide a variety of services that are in line with the New York State Continuum of Special Education Services, which is a continuum that's developed by New York State Ed. We offer related services, both through special education and through general education as needed. Those related services include speech-language therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, counseling, parent training and counseling, vision therapy, hearing services. These can be offered individual, they can be offered in a group, they can be offered standalone as a pull-out, or integrated as a push-in model. We also offer consultant teacher services, direct and indirect. Those services are, that is the classroom teacher working with a special education teacher to help make modifications to content, to curriculum, to address for that specific student or students. Direct is when the teacher is working directly in the classroom, so they have direct contact with the student. And indirect is when the teachers are collaborating and that special education teacher doesn't have that direct time. I want to jump down to integrated co-teaching for a moment. Integrated co-teaching is predominantly provided at the elementary school level. And what that is, it's the 2 teachers, a special education teacher and the general education teacher, planning and delivering instruction together for the entire class. So consultant teacher services focuses on the individual students who are identified as needing support and services in the classroom. Integrated co-teaching is making the modifications and making it differentiating the instruction for the entire class and delivering it that way. Jumping back up to resource room. The resource room is predominantly provided at the high school level, although it's available throughout the grades, and that is a supplemental academic support for students identified. And then as needed, we have special class programming for students for whom the academic gap is to the extent that the best way to meet their academic needs is through a smaller class with significant modifications. So I'm going to go back to that idea of the least restrictive environment and talk about that third component. And that third component is the students with special education students who are served in separate settings. So separate settings includes homebound instruction, it includes hospital instruction, it includes special education schools. So across New York State, about 6% of special education students are receiving services in a special education separate environment. In Rhinebeck, at that time, which was in 14-15, ours was just about 8%. So that's an area in which we can see that we need to re-examine and consider how we can continue to provide the least restrictive environment for students. So as you see, the CSE approved out-of-district placements, not all of these are separate settings. Most of the BOCES programs and placements are not separate settings, but those separate settings are certainly the private day placements and the residential placements. So if you turn to the tables 5A and 5B, you'll see that by and large, starting in about 2009-10, you'll see that our day and residential programs have remained fairly consistent between 6 and 8 students. And you'll see that our BOCES students, our BOCES numbers have also have stayed fairly level between 8 and 10 throughout the years. Some years higher, some years less. I'll let you sit with that for a moment. Maybe you feel like I've shared a lot. Maybe you have any questions. So, as a new member to the community, like I said in my introduction, I have been visiting classrooms both inside and outside the district. I've had the opportunity to visit students outside at some of our BOCES placements and continue to visit our private day students and residentially placed students with the opportunity to learn more about the students' needs and programmatically what is best for the students. That alongside the work that I'm doing in terms of getting to know the instructional climate and the supports within the school district, both special education supports and the supports that are inherent in our Rhinebeck school district. Both pieces are absolutely critical as the department prepares for the annual review process, where we look at students' needs and we make plans for the upcoming years. And so it's an examination, it's conversations, it's dialogue, it's exploring options, and that's where I am at in terms of that. In addition, the Rhinebeck Central School District partners with agencies to provide school-to-work programming, and this is really to address our high school students who are working towards the CDOS credential. And so that's opportunities for students to go out to the community and work with the support of a job coach. That's provided, that service is provided, provides opportunities both here in Rhinebeck and in other areas such as in other cities such as Kingston, where the students have opportunities to interact, have tasks, follow through on tasks, complete their tasks. The job coaches report back to us and provide feedback, and then we can provide next steps, and it helps guide and shape their post-secondary outcomes. We also contract for the physical therapy and the occupational therapy, as well as parent training and counseling as needed. I really expected many more questions. I'm worried about what's going to happen at the end. Okay. All right, so graduation, along with the least restrictive environment focus from SED and the blueprint from SED, the spring of last year, winter and spring, we received a lot of changes a number of changes in terms of graduation requirements and options for students with special needs. So I'm not sure how familiar you are with graduation requirements, somewhat. So I'll walk through each category and speak to generalities. I also have a little bit of a snapshot to show you what some of the options are for students. So the Regents Diploma is available to all students, including students with special needs. The Regents Diploma it requires a certain amount of coursework, as you know, and taking the 5 Regents exams and passing them. The local diploma is an option for students who, in which students can earn a lesser grade on the Regents, and have options to. Students have options to appeal some of their performance on the Regents in some cases, and there is now an option for a superintendent determination. If a student performs poorly on a Regents earns, for example, a 30 on a U.S. History Regents, that student, if they took the class, they passed the class. If they attempted the Regents at least once, if they met all of the requirements for graduation, there is now an option for us to consider that superintendent determination to be granted a local diploma in spite of the 30% on the Regents. What we have to determine as well, and what the superintendent needs to determine is, has that student met the graduation requirement and standard proficiency level for that content area. So it's a very new requirement that was released in June of last year, and it does open the door for students to have an area of weakness. Another piece with a local diploma is that there's that CDOS, Career Development and Occupational Studies credential, can actually take the place of a Regents, and that's actually true for all students, not just students with special needs. So that does open up other options as well for students, especially students who are attending CTI. The IEP diploma was discontinued in 2013-14, and the CDOS diploma was, that was a big faux pas. The CDOS credential was adopted and brought on board. The CDOS credential is not a diploma, it is a credential, and that's something that starting in 8th and 9th grade, 8th grade, we're speaking about at annual reviews, because it's important for parents and CSCs to be aware of that as we move forward. The student is always expected to work towards a Regents diploma unless they are considered alternately assessed. And if they are not able to obtain the Regents diploma, they can certainly, in lieu of that, obtain a CDOS credential. But we as a school district are required to support the student towards obtainment of the Regents diploma. The Skills and Achievement credential is for students who are alternately assessed, and that's a determination made by the Committee on Special Education. And it looks at the students, the severity of their disability, and a number of other factors. And Every Student Succeed Act also has language in this and information about this, in which they really do expect that 1% or less of students, no more than 1% of students with special needs across the state would be eligible for this credential and for it to be alternately assessed. GED is an alternate exam that can be taken in place of the high school diploma, no longer called the GED, and then you drop out at 6 months. Yes.
With the CDOS credential, is there a percentage of kids that are allowed to leave high school with that credential, as there is this 1% on skills and achievement?
No.
Okay.
No, but as I said, we always work towards helping the student, supporting the students towards obtaining the Regents or local diploma, and should that not be successful through all of those various avenues, there is the CDOS credential.
Okay, thanks.
And thinking about our graduating seniors, as you saw on table 2, we have 11. Now we have 12 students, and of those students, I believe it looks like 9 students will be working towards either Regents or a local diploma. One is looking to move towards the CDOS credential at this point, and then there are 2 that are undetermined. But of course, June is still months away, so we're working for all of those students to work towards at least the local, if not the Regents. Committee on Preschool Special Education, another group of students that falls under my purview in the Office of Special Education is our little friends, ages 3 to 5. And this is a partnership between the school district and the local county, in our county, Dutchess County. The school district, myself, I'm responsible for ensuring that students are identified and that services are delivered and students' needs are being met. As a school district, we are not responsible for the delivery of those services or the evaluations. Those pieces come under the responsibility of Dutchess County, of the local county. And so it's a collaborative partnership that we have with Dutchess County, in which they contract certain providers and evaluators, and parents have choice in who they select to evaluate, who they select to provide the service, and we facilitate that process. And so as we look towards next year, for the 17-18 school year, it looks like we have about 10 students at this point, although their numbers always change. But right now we have about 10 students who are identified and moving into our kindergarten class for the 17-18 school year. That is on the higher end, as you'll see on the data sheet. Which does not have a fancy number. Okay.
Emily,
Yeah.
just to make a point,
Please.
the board well knows that we're seeing kindergarten classes of 60 or 70 students. So if you have 10 CPSE students aging into kindergarten, and you do the math. And then that's all I have to say. I mean, it's a higher percentage than we'd like if we had any choice in the matter.
And not all of these students will be found eligible for CSE services. There's a different eligibility criteria. We have not yet made a determination. The process for CPSE students aging into kindergarten is this. What happens is that we expect all CPSE students, families to register for kindergarten as any other kindergarten family would. They would participate in the kindergarten screening process, regardless of what services they're receiving through the CPSE. We collaborate, coordinate with the CPSE providers to identify what evaluations need to be completed and connect with parents, which we'll be doing in the next, in the end of January, the beginning of February, about additional assessments and evaluations needed in order to make a committee on special education determination. So when we meet with these families in May, we'll have had the opportunity to gather additional data, evaluated data. We'll have had the opportunity for members of our faculty, whether it be school psychologists, speech teachers, or special education teachers, to visit the students. I've already visited a number preliminarily, but an opportunity for them to visit the students in their CPSE settings. We'll have the opportunity to have all of the kindergarten screening data at our fingertips as well. So when we come together as a CSC, we have a lot of really strong information to help guide and make those next steps and recommendations for kindergarten. And there may be one or two students of that group of 10 who may require supports that go beyond what we can provide in our kindergarten class. But that, again, that is yet nothing has been recommended at this point.
So I'm sure there's no typical, but out of these 10 CPSE kids, is it possible that once you've done your CSE analyses that, maybe 7 of these kids end up needing IEPs or
Yes.
or service, and then the other,
Seven is a very close number.
reasonable number?
Yes, because students receiving CPSE services are identified as preschoolers with a disability, and a lot of the time, students with, especially, you'll see it with language delays, speech and language delays. If it's an articulation issue or if the language delay is minimal, it can be addressed through our general education support services. The Rhinebeck Central School District, the Rhinebeck student is quite fortunate in having opportunities to access supports without having being identified as a student with special needs, including the speech and language therapy, which they can continue to receive throughout their elementary years as needed as a general education student, as well as OT and PT as needed. And those pieces are followed up by the school administration through the CST process and the guidance process. So there is that expectation that there will be a few students who will be declassified.
Great.
Emily, what total number of specials?
You mentioned the full classes.
Oh, 216, 7 is what we've been in kindergarten.
Thank you so much. sorry to interrupt.
No, no, I'm sorry, I misunderstood the question.
Like I said, I wear a few different hats, and the other one is to support English language learners. And so you'll see that we've had a gradual increase of our English language learners in the district. That being said, that is not the most exciting news in the world of ELL services and supports. The most exciting news is that in June of 2015, New York State Ed revised their Part 154 regulations, which really required that school districts, what it did, I apologize, it outlined the delivery of services based on the student's proficiency level, their English proficiency. So what that means is that we cannot say this ELL student we'll pull them out for some standalone service. There is a script of services that we have to provide based on the student's proficiency, most of which are integrated into the general education classroom. So a lot of the focus in the world of ELL has been focused on integrated co-teaching, similar to our special education students as well, but the delivery of service looks slightly different for those students who are acquiring the English language. So strong emphasis on co-teaching and integration, strong emphasis on professional development to support general education teachers, teaching assistants, and all faculty to address the needs of ELL students, and a strong focus on parent education, parent support, and parent participation in that process. And so we had the opportunity, I worked with we have 2 ELL teachers in the district, and we had the opportunity to present to parents some of these changes and gave recommendations and suggestions, and it was a nice opportunity to connect with them and to share some information that they might not have been aware of, and we'll continue to do that every October. So that is the world of ELL. And then and again, I want to point out, these are not necessarily special education students. In fact, most are not. There are some that are dually ELL and special education identified, but most are not. And then the students are identified as McKinney-Vento students, and those students are students living in temporary housing. They might be doubled up due to economic hardship. They might be in transitory housing. They might be in 2 different houses. And as the McKinney-Vento liaison, it's my responsibility to ensure that we're meeting the needs of these students, that we first identify the students and provide transportation, and then to ensure that as the Every Student Succeeds Act really focuses on the elimination of barriers to activities, to participation in field trips and things that may present as challenging. So kind of being on the forefront of what are the potential challenges for this student and for this family, and trying to be as proactive as possible. In addition, while the Every Student Succeed Act does not specify any amount, but they strongly recommend annual professional development in the world of McKinney-Vento, and so we're speaking to faculty at the middle school and high school tomorrow regarding supporting students in temporary housing, as well as the ESSA also provided additional guidance and focus on students who are unaccompanied minors. And unaccompanied minors are protected and eligible under McKinney-Vento. So current initiatives in special education. So as I've alluded to throughout the presentation, I'm continuing to visit classrooms, look at IEPs, ensure that practices in the classroom and IEPs are all aligned and they're meeting the needs of the students. Teachers have been absolutely fantastic in welcoming me in their classrooms, being active participants in the CSE process, and telling me areas where they could receive additional support. And that's an important piece, the fact that they're open to share that, and to also celebrate those areas where they see that they have really supported students is fantastic. And so I've really enjoyed those dialogues and continue to have them throughout the years. And as a result of those, refining the programs to meet the evolving needs of special education students. One of the joys of having a small school district is that we're like a family, and that we know we all are here to support one another, and we all work together and we collaborate. But one of the challenges is that we're creating sometimes as we go, and so that can be a challenge. And so it's about being proactive and seeing, looking down the horizon of what the needs are of the student population, and preparing by providing that professional development and the planning opportunities for teachers. And then the second piece is the focus on high school preparedness and post-secondary transition planning. High school preparedness really speaks to the idea of parents and students and faculty all knowing what those graduation outcomes and requirements are, and so that we are moving students in a supported way to meet those requirements. And then the post-secondary transition planning is the idea of students taking an active part in the development of their IEPs and planning to help move them towards their goals, whether they be college or career bound. And part of that is working with New York State Ed to ensure that those areas of our IEPs are really meeting students' needs. And so we're providing additional professional development to teachers at the secondary level in this area. And I actually had an opportunity to meet with parents and discuss what high school looks like for students with special needs, what supports we have, and what graduation options there are. At that parent workshop, I had the opportunity to connect parents with agencies, which is another focus of the Blueprint for special needs students. And that is, those agencies are typically, there are two. Access VR, which provides vocational and college support to students with disabilities. And we typically recommend students apply for those starting in the 11th grade. So we've had a few of those applications go through. So we had a representative from Access VR, and then we also had a representative from the Office of Persons with Developmental Disabilities. And that's a support system that can provide supports for students children as young as 3. So that can be a wraparound community-based support. Those are really important supports, because those students often have significant needs that for which the parents need additional support. So we've had the opportunity to bring those two community members in to help bridge that gap to transition planning and to beyond high school. Like I said, we're offering that professional development to teachers to enhance the support and the assessment and the data gathering to inform our transition activities while their students are with us in the high school. And then to create a consistent transition plan that will serve our students from 6th grade to 12th grade is my next step in that. And I think that the one last piece that I didn't mention, and I feel like I cannot leave this conversation without mentioning, is that as I've had the opportunity to meet with teachers, parents, and faculty, and support students, what we're seeing in terms of, I think in the past what you've heard is that there has been this of autism, students identified with autism, as you can see in that table, one of the tables with the classifications. And that has remained steady. What we're seeing now in terms of needs, student needs within the district, and I would say it would be regional as well, is the student needs in the area of mental health support and executive functioning disorders, so those such as ADHD, and those needs manifesting in some school avoidance and school phobia, school refusal. And so I've been working very closely with school administrators here in the district and community members and mental health professionals and our student support staff to develop really individual plans for students to move through these areas of need to access their education here in Rhinebeck. And so I think it's really pertinent that one of the board's goals this year does focus on school climate, because I think that is certainly setting the stage to supporting students who may be percolating with these concerns. And likewise, the CDEP plan also speaks to school climate and really looking at those pieces. And so I think that as we move forward to support students with special needs, especially this population, what we're doing as a school district is really, I want to just thank the board for these efforts, because it will support the students in the long run. Thank you.
I'm actually glad that you mentioned goals. I want to ask you about, not about the goal per se, but to just sort of tie your piece of your part of the world into one of the goals that we've been developing during this year, which is comprehensive district enrollment plan. So as you probably know, one of the perennial issues that the district has grappled with, the board in particular has grappled with at budget time, is integrating funding for special needs population with the funding for general student population, and making sure that neither side gets shortchanged in the overall school budgetary monies. And on a year-to-year basis, it's kind of hard to deal with, but one of the things that we want to do is to try to look forward and see if we can start working towards sort of a less ad hoc approach. So do you have any thoughts on, how we can move forward with it in terms of planning for the special needs population's needs?
Well, I think it starts with that tier 1 instruction. And I think it's really important to think about how we are responding to the needs of the faculty and providing for students' needs within the classroom. And as we enhance and continue to support the work that the teachers are doing, fantastic work the teachers are already doing in the classroom, to target students with special needs, as we continue to support them, my hope would be that we can continue to provide an inclusive setting for students who need more restrictions. So throughout the elementary school, and see how we can extend that to difficult in a small district, because as we look at the numbers and of the students placed out, it's across all grade levels. So it's not that we can grab kids and make a special program for them necessarily. So it's really creative thinking about how we can continue to keep the rigor in the classroom and the high expectations and support them. What that support looks like. So I think it's a really important piece, and as I've been part of the conversations over the last few months, I've realized the attention that my department will have in those conversations, and I look forward to planning forward. The other goal, which we didn't mention, technology. That we have some really strong faculty members using technology. We have many strong faculty members, of course, but using technology in the special education department. So it's about also utilizing those resources to support, to accommodate needs in a regular classroom. And so we're providing some professional development in that area, and looking to enhance that technology as a tool for students. Yes.
Thank you so much for this overview and for articulating sort of priorities moving forward. I'm wondering if this is probably something that's so standard to the work you do in your profession that it almost goes without saying, but I feel like in a public, meeting, it's worth asking the question. When we talk about least restrictive environment and inclusivity as a value in our community, we think often about how that affects the students that we're trying to include, right? And I hope you could share with us your understanding, which I think probably we all share, but I feel like it's worth describing, of inclusivity for students. Maybe you aren't requiring special services, but are benefiting in ways that are very real and very tangible by having inclusive environments at all age levels? Do you see where my question's coming from?
So it's, you can approach it from strictly academic standpoint. You can also approach it from a more of a soft skills standpoint. So certainly having students in the classroom, regular education classroom, provides an opportunity for students to see, to be aware of the different needs within their small community, and develop an understanding of empathy, and that fare isn't always equal, and that's difficult for adults to understand, so it's even more difficult sometimes to help children understand. But I think it's important to have those conversations and to be really transparent with students. And so when you bring a student who has, for example, an FM unit into a kindergarten classroom, so at morning meeting, we're going to each take turns practicing, feeling what it's like to have the FM unit and understand why the student has the FM unit, for example. And to not make it an avoidable conversation, but bring it out and make it a very real conversation and involve the child's family, their children's families, if they're open and willing. So that's one piece, is developing the understanding of difference and the understanding of inclusivity. It's important when we're thinking about developing, certainly as we move forward in reporting out, maybe not as great, so what's your strength? And negotiating those conversations as peers versus not always, from the teacher down. So that's one piece. The other piece is the opportunity for students who, maybe the middle of the road students who are students who have some weaker skills, and then by doing so, they're having that opportunity to practice, to teach, to instruct, to really take ownership over their learning and talk. When they're responding to a math problem or to something pen and paper, but here is a real world example of explaining your thinking and explaining the process to a peer, and then being able to answer questions and address those pieces. And then and then we think about the students who are not identified and have some skill gaps, and what we're doing to support students with special needs has a ripple effect for those students who are not identified, who don't need the special education services, but certainly have areas of need, and we're addressing those by the inherent nature of differentiating in our classroom and providing accommodations and different entry points into the curriculum. So there's a lot of benefit to having that inclusive program.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
Well, thank you for being here, and I'm glad you're enjoying your time getting to know our community. I mean, I think since all the time that I've been here, point of pride for our district is our special education department, and what a great job that our staff does. I'm going to apologize for the next question. I'm sorry. As a board, we have to deal with the tax cap era and the budget getting tighter and tighter every year. And it's never been, special ed's never been something that we've kind of broken down and really looked at, how that money is spent. In general ed, if we need to save money, you can look at raising class sizes, cutting programs, but we've never really done that with special education. I'm wondering if you could kind of just help us, or help me understand, what would that look like if there were cuts in special education? What would that look like? How would that affect programs?
Well, I think that well, let's speak to who we have in district right now. I think we have at this point 11, if I'm not mistaken, we have 11 special education. Okay, we have 5 in the elementary, and we have 3 in the grade. Yeah, we have 6.
Generally is fine.
Yeah,
No,
so we have 11 special education teachers. So we provide those special education teachers provide a variety of different services, a variety of different programming. So should we look at, and that would be the bulk of our in-district budget, personnel budget. So, and then we have teaching assistants. And so it's a matter of instruction that's offered in the regional term. And in terms of some of our co-teaching classrooms in elementary school, what we do is day, and then when the teacher's not there, so there are implications. Other ways to look at where we're making rent in terms of out-of-district placements, and look at what we are receiving in terms of aid in those areas, and we can look at working to partner with local districts, other districts, to see what small class or specialized programs they have that we can work with that might be bids to see if we can get services at a reduced cost. And so I did that in one of those areas, and so that as we move forward, there's room there to look at.
So when you're talking about in the classes, so that would look like someone who has a full-time special ed teacher, maybe half-time or something for that student, or having an aide instead of a full-time
So the
special ed
challenge
teacher.
is that the Committee on Special Education makes recommendations for students' needs based on student needs and not necessarily.
Right.
So that
sure.
that becomes the challenge.
Right. It's just something we've never really talked about or understood.
And like
So
I said, there are a lot of services and supports, including speech, OT and PT, and AIS supports that are provided, academic supports that are provided by the special education department. Our special education teachers don't just work with the classified students, they also work with the non-classified students. So by looking at making shifts and cuts there, then what we would be doing, not just be jeopardizing potentially special education programming, but it might really mean the elimination of additional AIS support that teachers provide versus the required mandated services per the IEP.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I think the irony of the conversation is that when Emily was, at the beginning of her remarks, she was basically talking about an exemplary program of best practices that gets great results.
Right.
And then we had the inevitable discussion, okay, so if we had to cut back, what's the impact of that? And the impact is certainly limited by a lot of regulatory requirements, numbers of kids that can be serviced. You can't all of a sudden decide to provide certain special education services to a group of 18 special education kids, because the law says the maximum is whatever, 6 or 8 or 4.
Right.
So you're limited there. We need to make sure we're compliant with law and regulation, of course. Even if we didn't want to, we would have to. Now, of course, we do want to. So that starts to limit your options as to the kinds of things you can do to save money, to be able to trim the budget. And the other thing I mentioned to this board more than once, and special education is one of the areas, in a way we're a victim of our own success. We do a great job with our special ed program, so if you're a parent and you have the wherewithal to move and buy a house in the Rhinebeck district, and you ask around, you ask the parent community, what school district does an exemplary job of providing services to their kids and is successful with those kids, Rhinebeck's going to pop up in the conversation. I'm not saying we're the only ones, but it's going to pop up in the conversation. So you're thinking about, where am I going to buy a house to educate my 3-year-old who's going to need special education services potentially for the next 13, 14 years? Well, yeah, Rhinebeck's the place. And you can't throw a barricade up at the edge of the district and say, sorry, we have enough, we're not taking anymore. We take whoever is a resident here. And so, it's not surprising to me that we're in this catch-22. We do a great job with our program, and we're in some ways being overwhelmed with the requests for services. I mean, it's a dilemma. I mean, I wish I had the easy answer. I think everyone's talked about a few of it. Look at how we might be able to access services within the districts. Look at how we might be able to pull back programs and offer them in our school district, excuse me, and save the amounts of money that go along with having to send students out of district.
The other piece is our classification rate is substantially lower than New York State, and it has been. And part of that, the reason is that the Rhinebeck School District has a commitment to early identification and early support of students. And so if we were to make shifts in how we deliver services of OT, PT, and academic services, that would be not impacting the special education students as much. Well, it certainly would, but more so the students who are not identified by an IEP, but receive BST support and those other mental education services. And so we see that increase in our numbers, and then the significant programmatic needs of that. So it's a difficult.
Well, I would just close out this part of our board meeting to say that it's really been a pleasure to have Emily as a member of our staff. She's very knowledgeable. She works well with staff and parents and her fellow administrators, and I'm happy that she's a member of the team. Thanks for being here tonight. You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So you can do whatever you need to do to get your stuff and get out of here. You won't bother us. We'll just keep moving on. Okay. Okay. Do you have to do anything? Just turn that down. Okay. Great. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Be careful out there.
With that, we'll move on to our mid-year review of 2016-17 board goals.
Okay, so I've provided that in your packet, nothing you haven't seen before. Obviously we've, I've checked off number 5 on my bucket list already. And, as you're not surprised, we put a lot of time and effort into addressing that goal with I'd say a pretty good level of success, and the others are works in progress at various other levels. But
Deirdre?
I would just add, it seems that we are making good and measurable progress on goal number 2. And we have benchmarks actually in place, as we'll see later when we talk over again the reports from the school start time committee, but benchmarks in place for bringing this to a vote in the full board. So good progress on that one.
Lisa?
Those two were the ones that I saw as being the most advanced too. And contract negotiations, they're just on the timeline that they're on, so there's really much to say.
yeah, and I mean we're moving forward with that, and there'll be more progress as we actually start to sit at the table a little later
So
the school year.
I want to get a better handle on where we're at with our where are we at with the work to try to address that?
Well, I mean, I'll speak, others of you who have been involved in various board committees can, feel free to jump in and throw me a line at any point. But the first one, and we have established a meeting with some of our stakeholders who are members or leaders of organizations in our community.
That's February.
That February 3rd, that's correct. By way of meeting with folks from the PTSO, from the Rhinebeck Science Foundation, from Culture Connect. Who's that?
Enta.
And some of those community groups that are made up of members of our community who exist for the sole purpose of supporting, well, more or less, the purpose of supporting our school district. So we're going to be opening that conversation with them on February 3rd by way of setting up a meeting with a broader group of our school district stakeholders to talk about sustainable schools and what we do over the course of the next number of years to keep the Rhinebeck schools viable organizations that are meeting the needs of kids. And one of the factors that we've discussed and we'll have to deal with and will be part of that conversation, though not the only part, is the same shrinking enrollments that every school district except for the most urban school district in Dutchess County is experiencing. Every school district in our region is experiencing steady, not drastic, but steady enrollment decline, at least at this stage of the game. And we certainly, part of that first goal is to pull together data on our enrollment trends, both past and projected into the future by at least the 5 years that we have live birth data to even look at. We don't know what's going to happen 6 years from now or 7 years from now, and I keep waiting until the year when the millennials start having babies and we see that trend go up. And time will tell whether that's the way it works or whether it doesn't. But I mean, we have to plan for the relatively near future in terms of programs that we're able to provide. Emily's presentation was certainly a great entree to that broader discussion. So we have a few things in the works that are moving us toward the broader community discussion of sustainable schools and what we can do, not only as a school, but as a community to support the sustainability of our schools. And, if you're I know I'm preaching to the choir and belaboring the obvious with you, but if you're a homeowner in this community, you want your home, your property to continue to have value, and strong schools bring value to that investment in your real estate, whether you live here or whether this is a second home or whatever. So that's the conversation that we're, I think, on our way to having that. The technology integration piece, I mean, that's something that, whereas in goal number 1, Tom is going to have to chew a good-sized piece of that in terms of collecting some of the demographic data that we already have and, charting it out for us. And under number 3, we're engaged in a process of developing a K-12 technology curriculum, and that's a piece that Steve Jensen is working on, and ultimately is going to have to own that that report to the board later in this school year. We have a superintendent's conference day scheduled for February 17th. That's totally focused on technology, and we'll continue to work with the curriculum committee through that process of looking at that, not only the middle school curriculum, which is more fleshed out than the pieces on either side of that, than the the K-5 and the 9-12 is more of a framework than a unit by unit curriculum plan. But ultimately, that's the goal, is to build that out as well. So I mean, those are both works in progress, and I mean, we'll do our best to push that down the road as far as we're able to in 1 year. As those of you who have been working on and writing and adopting board goals, you know that oftentimes, except for the discrete goals like negotiating a contract or floating getting a successful result on a facilities capital project, many of these other goals tend to be multi-year goals. I mean, they're big. We're biting off a big bite, and sometimes they're bigger than you can reasonably chew and swallow in 1 year. So some of these may actually wind up having to be extended into future years, but that's okay. I think at the very least, we'll have had a pretty good start, if not a successful completion of some of these, perhaps not all of these. And we are working with 5 goals here this year. I would just want to remind the board about that. I don't want to miss an opportunity to point that out.
We're
so
overachievers.
This is it's a big plate, and it's kind of spilling off the sides, but we're working on it. And I think we've made progress in some areas more than others on all those goals, and we'll keep doing it. And this is really just the opportunity, kind of mid-year, to dipstick kind of where we're at and remind all of us what still needs to be done.
I was interested to hear Emily talking to us about the special needs population and the services being delivered to it in terms of some of the goals here. And I actually think that it might be useful for us as we move towards evaluating the success of these goals and what remains to be done on them, to hear reports, or at least have conversations with some of the group leaders, as it were, who can address how they've interacted with the goals also. I think that's something.
And by group leaders, I just want to make sure I'm understanding.
Well,
Are you talking our administrators, for example?
Administrators would be a group.
Yes.
Right. Emily is an administrator,
Right.
but she also oversees a substantive area that the district does. So, I think that might be helpful for us.
Yeah, well, I mean, in my own mind, as I'm sitting in the back trying to work the camera and listening to Emily's presentation, and responding to questions about the intersection of board goals with her department. I'm thinking that likely some kind of reporting out before the end of this year from Marvin, from Steve Jensen, from Tom Burnell, perhaps on his slice of that first goal, might be helpful. The other comment I would make is that I think the fact that Emily mentioned the crosswalk between her program and a few of these goals without prompting from me to do so, I think that kind of brings me back to a discussion we had over the summer, and I think it's emblematic of the fact that our administrators are very well aware of these goals, and they kind of get it, and they're making conscious efforts to make those connections too. So it's nice to hear that come out of Emily's presentation. Again, without I did not say, make sure you talk about the board goals. I mean, I let them do their thing, and certainly that's something she absorbed right off the bat, and it's good to hear it.
Laura?
So, I think it would be great if we got some of those folks in to talk about, their intersection with
Yep.
these goals. Are there any parts of these, any pieces of these, I want you to set our expectations for toward the end of the year, that you feel like we're just not going to be able to make a, marked dent in by the end of the year?
Well, I think we're going to make a marked dent in all of them. I think the question from my perspective is which ones will wind up having to carry over into a subsequent year, because you can make a marked dent in something and still have a lot more work to do to get it to where you ultimately want it to be. In a perfect world, I'd say, we're, if the last time around is any indication, I'm optimistic that we can have a contract done before the end of the school year like we did last time. That may not play out that way, okay? We may need to run it through the summer or through the beginning of the fall. Hopefully not later than that, but I mean, I've seen it work all of those ways, so I'm optimistic that we have a reasonably good climate here for negotiating a successor agreement. So I'm optimistic that we'll put a large dent in that, if not have it done. Again, not to rest on our collective laurels, but I mean, facilities capital project, we're going to be planning the work. I mean, we're off and running there. So, and we're having our first meeting on the 17th with our construction and design professionals to say, okay, let's go. Next steps. We've already been in touch with bond council. You're going to vote on a bond
Bond resolution.
Resolution, thank you, that's the word I was looking for, tonight. So, I mean, that's moving into the next phase already, and at some point, that'll be maybe a goal for next year, is doing the actual management of the construction of that capital project bond work. I think those ones that will make the biggest dent in, I think we'll have number 2 as well. I feel with a high level of confidence that we'll have a resolution to bring to the board later this spring with survey data and some other supporting documentation to say we tried it, we piloted it. This is what our community is telling us. Based on that data, our recommendation is X, and you guys either vote it up or vote it down. So I think we'll bring that to a close. I have a high level of confidence that we'll bring that one to a close by April or April-ish, okay? So out of 5 pretty big goals, I think there's a very good chance that we'll have done 3 of them pretty much, done, and the other 2, I think we'll have made some reasonable progress, but we may not have foreclosed 1 and 3. I think that's a pretty good track record considering the number of goals and the impact of each of those 3 goals. I mean, these are huge goals, to even the kind of pro forma ones. Well, yeah, we have to negotiate a contract. Oh, yeah, that's just kind of what we do. It's still a big deal. I mean, those of you who've worked on personnel committee know what that involves, even in a good year where we're able to bring one home in 6 or 7 weeks, okay? I mean, it's still an intensive 6 or 7 weeks for those of us who are working on that. So I think that'd be some pretty good progress if we got that far, personally. Hope I answered your question.
Absolutely.
So keep working at it.
Okay, any more on 4 goals? Go ahead.
Actually, just wanted to ask, this is sort of corollaries to that, where do we stand on the superintendent's evaluation?
You'll hear about that in the report under 4.4.
So that will move on to the 2017-18 budget development update.
Okay.
First draft budget.
Tom, this one's for you.
All right. Well, we can get to goal number one a little bit and talk about it.
Okay, well, that's all right.
And
good.
that is under the tab enrollment. Well, yeah, let's go to enrollment. There's a tab called enrollment. I think yours is the same.
Did I get the-
yeah. Well,
Did I get the bargain- did I get the bargain
No, I think
basement
you got-
for writing?
No, I think you
Enrollment.
had it, yeah. Yeah.
All right, I got
Get
it.
your magnifying glasses.
Yeah, I know, it's very small, but actually I could probably knock off a couple of prior ones, but,
Well, I could see it just fine.
You're much
better
younger.
without my glasses. So, kind of want to give you a little update where we are with enrollment.
Nice
As
segue,
of
Tom.
as of Bed's Day, which was, I think, October 6th, the
Yeah.
first Wednesday of October, we had 1,054 students, which was 42 less than the prior year, okay? We are down to 1,049 students now. So since Bed's Day, we've lost 5 students. So trend is still going down. As I project and look into next year, I'm predicting we're going to lose about 40 students. We have a potential of 106 seniors this year, though that's actually one of the numbers that's gone down. Of those 5 less we had, I think 4 of them are out of,
Oh, really?
have a senior class, so I think they're down to 102 now. But you have 102 with, looking at 60 coming in for next year. That basically is giving our difference of 40, though it does vary across the different spectrums. But you're seeing the the elementary school, which has 425 students this year, go down to 407. Class of 85 leaving with 60 coming in. So that's really where you're still getting the decrease in the elementary school. The middle school is stabilizing itself. They're around 240, and they're probably going to stabilize around there for quite a number of years, going a number of years out, about 240 students. Of course, it'll vary a little bit by class, but overall that school is pretty much at its level. It's going to be going here forward until they hit another bump, about another 5 years out. The high school is going to start to see a decrease in the number of kids. You're seeing they got 390 in the high school now, losing about 20 kids, losing about 40 kids the prior, over 30. Then another 20 kids. So we're really going to see the effects really now up in the high school as we go forward. So it kind of gives you an idea of where our students are and what I see over the next couple of years. With the elementary school, it's sort of stabilizing around 400. The middle school stabilizing around 240, and we're just going to see a real drop off in the high school of about 100 kids over 5 years. So that will have a big impact potentially on staffing as we go forward. But so I just want to kind of give you an idea of where we are with our enrollment as we look to next year. Any questions about enrollment? I think one of the things as I look at goal number 1 and taking a look at class size and things of that nature, that's really going to be a big driver of the number of staff needed. Would be, do we set limits at K through 2, 3 through 5? Do we kind of say, middle school shouldn't be over a certain size depending on the class? That can have greatly affect how many teachers are required. Because we're getting to the point now where there isn't, like in the middle school, there's no 5 sections anymore. They're coming to 4 sections, and now what are you doing with that extra session? Right now they're able to fill in different ways. AIS support. They actually have a couple classes up in the high school are being taught by middle school teachers now. And it's, you know, taking a look at the whole thing. So it's not only the enrollment, but the staffing that will go with it, and that will drive our budgets, because your budget's 75% personnel between the benefits and the salaries. So that's a big significant portion of that. So the next thing I would like you to do is to go to the tab for first draft budget. It should be towards the beginning. We made copies of the rollover budget that we went over in December, so there's a copy in there for you. And in the budgets, what I'm doing is I'm doing the budget, the tax levy limit, and the revenues. I'm not separating them all out because you're switching all over the place. It gets a little confusing. So I figured those are the three documents that we talk about in each of these. So what I just want to do is go through some of the highlights in the first draft. And there's not a whole lot because there's no new.
Well, it's not too far off the rollover budget.
No,
is
it's
it?
really not too far off. It's about $30,000 higher. There is one less teacher in this at the elementary level. So it's one less teacher plus an additional $30,000 over the rollover. And I'll just go through some of the highlights of what really has changed from the rollover budget. And at the first page, you know, through general support and that, there's not a whole lot of changes. As far as that's concerned, there's no new, programs we're looking to, and certainly unless we can come up with some programs that will save. And what I want you to go to is page 3 at the very bottom. We're seeing, and you'll see in a couple places as we go through it, the effect of some retirements from last year. So you're seeing a COGA. Well, if you're not changing, personnel or dropping personnel, why is this number going down? Well, and that was a retirement at the end of last year, so there's a savings in this year's budget, and now I'm adjusting for it in the next budget. So we're looking at a negative $8,000 there. Now, if we turn the page over,
Tom, before you move up to
Yeah.
that's because of the differential in salary. Because
Retirement.
The person who retired is making more than the person who.
oh yeah, yes, yep. You had a person come out at step 17, replaced by someone coming out at step 1. The ANI personnel, the non-instructs, their salaries are all in here. Their contract is set for next year. So these are actual numbers that, that tie out to their contract. Where the RTA, there are some adjustments, but those adjustments are putting people where they belong, because there's been some shifting around between the different buildings, special ed and that, so there's some adjustments there, but the RTA is not showing any increases. Those increases are budgeted for in the benefit section. So, but if we go to page number 4, about the first third, fuel, oil, and electricity, we're remaining the same. Fuel oil is starting to go back up in price. There is savings there, but you don't know what December or March of 2018 is going to look like. We don't know what that's going to look like, so we feel comfortable there with that number. And electricity, we're just rolling it over at the same price we had last year. We reduced the budgets for both those and want to maintain them right now. A little bit of concern going forward, just to let you know, with the potential closing of Indian Point down in Peekskill, we do expect electrical rates to go up. We just don't know how much, but it's a couple years down the road. But it's something to be aware of. Electrical rates will probably increase based on that.
Not according to the governor.
Yeah, I know, but
No, he won't.
but there's no doubt
Could
about
be
it.
selling something off a street cart in Washington.
Electricity from Indian Point is so much cheaper than anywhere else. But I know, I understand the reason for it, but the reality is, it will cost us more. So we're gonna look to possibly lock into some pricing before it really starts to get out. Let's see, anything else on that page? No, not really at all. On page 5, there's really nothing of consequence at all. These are just ordinary things, no difference. If we go over to page 6 and we look up to the top where we have the general support, so this is really basically operation and maintenance and administration for the most part. We're seeing an overall 1.38% increase. Okay. As we look to the next section where we're starting the section of instruction, Marvin has requested a $17,000 increase to professional development. Now that isn't an increase to his total budget because on the next page, we're taking out $17,000 out of a BOCES program that he's going to do himself. So he's trading off doing the former OSCES program. I forget what that's called now, but we're looking into
Doing that in-house.
We're already up to speed on that training, so we're shifting those monies to professional development. If we look about 2/3 of the way down, we see a negative $23,000. That is a result of a retirement in the elementary school principal's office.
From last year.
From last year, yep. Joe reminded me that the teachers need to declare by February 6th, the first Monday of October, their intentions.
Of February.
Of February for retirement. Where any people, there is no requirement whatsoever. I can't remember, I think it's 90 days or something like that, but they typically can retire at any point. They're not beholden to end of the school year typically. So, so just to let you know that. If we go on to the next page, after down, we see the negative $17,000 that Marvin's taken out of his BOCES services. And then below, you'll see some shifting of some monies. And what I've done is gone back through and we've shifted people around. There is a decrease in the elementary school, but you only see negative 16,000. You actually see it basically coming out of 7th and 8th grade, of the shifting of those figures around. And also with the middle school. But, you know, between those two, everything being the same from one year to the next, the total population of our, not our total teacher, but our 2110 teachers, we can see a decrease of about $90,000 over last year. And that's just some fine tuning in that. I did increase substitutes by 10 grand. I'm trying to do that every year because some years that can go way out of sight. Some years better than others. And, I think we do have quite a few leaves that are going to be coming up and coming to the board shortly.
Yeah.
As we go over onto page number 8, these are actual quotes, these are coming from the principals who've handed in their particular budgets to myself. And what I want to do is really group it in categories. You know, if we, not into any individual. And if we look about 2/3 of the way, total equipment, they're only looking for a little over $9,000, or a little under $9,000. So it's a decrease over the prior year. And as we go through this and we go to the next page, about 2/3 of the way down, there's total contractual expenses. These are typically repairs, our SRO program, these are those type of situations, and they are looking for an increase of $11,000 or about 24%. Remember, these are the codes that got cut back last year. So they're trying to restore some of those monies. I just want to let you know why some of these may look, wow, that's hot. Well, these are codes that got reduced by about 20% or so, if I remember correctly. The next section is textbooks. The textbooks are going up by about $11,000. It's on page number 10. It's showing a pretty significant increase, about 18%. Most of that it's at the high school. In fact, you'll see textbooks at the middle school are almost non-existent. But those were his needs are. As we go down through the rest of them and go on to page number 11, our supplies and materials are up about 5%. But overall, the total for this area is down 0.3%. You remember the raises for the teachers aren't in there. So that kind of, kind of hard to put a real figure on that, though. The next area is the area that Emily talked about. and this is the programs for students with disabilities or special ed. I have put in an extra $10,000 into home tutoring. Tutoring is going off the charts right now, just for all various reasons. I mean, I can't be very specific about that, but it's a need that we're seeing a lot of, and you're going to see tutoring again here. This is tutoring done by employees of ours, or people we've hired. The next line below that, we have another retirement in the special ed office from last year, the savings. If we go a little bit further down, about 3 or 4 lines, I created a new code called tutoring. This is tutoring done by outside agencies. Kids who are hospitalized, things of that nature. We don't have employees go there. Usually that facility has a tutoring company that we then contract with. Go a little bit further down, and they're the 2 biggest numbers, and they always get me every time I look at them, and that's tuition other. And these are for special ed students who go to private schools, okay? So these are to, though we don't have anybody, Center for Spectrum Services, Springbrook, those type of schools. Right now, I got $1,007,000. There's still a lot of work to be done in this area, okay? CSA meetings have not taken place yet. Emily's working with us. Actually, we're getting together every about 3 or 4 weeks. We've been getting together to discuss the progress and those things that she's known.
Some of these are placeholders until those decisions are
Some of them
made.
are definitely placeholders. Now, in your budget book, I do have a tab in there for tuition students. So you'll be able to see each of the tuition students. No names. I got school ID numbers, that's it. But you can see where they are. And there's some potential savings there. Some of the things that she discussed, I think you need to be aware of, is that one of the things comes with graduating. And what we're finding is some students are staying around longer. They typically would already have left, but because they can't get a Regents degree or a local diploma, they're staying on.
They're allowed to attend school until they're 21.
Sometimes they're doing multiple years at CTI. Sometimes they're here. Sometimes I know one that's in another school district right now placed. Those, we're hoping they graduate, but we can't say for sure yet whether they're going to be graduating or be with us next year. But what I've done in that number is I've placed everybody in there that we currently have, and I added 1 unanticipated placement. So we'll have to see where that all goes.
So that's a projection.
This is right now is total projection, and I tried to be conservative, but like one of the things that Emily did say to us tonight, she's still looking at CPSE. Those are the preschoolers coming into kindergarten. She doesn't fully know what their needs are yet. So those may have to be built in. We don't know yet. There's at least 4 potential people that are in that tuition place that won't be with us next year. So there's a good possibility that number could come down. So it's hard to tell yet. We go a couple more lines down, we have BOCES services. Just like we have on the private side, we have the same thing on the BOCES side. This is everybody in their position plus 1 unanticipated placement. There's a potential of 1 student not going to be here. People could move out, people could move in. I have no control over that part of it, but.
Now, this is not the same thing as paying the BOCES administrative budget.
No, this is strictly for
nothing
the
to do with
special
that.
ed. It's for students.
Tuition.
It's also, there's a different software that we have that's purchased through this coaster, so it's just not all student. Some of it
But
is.
it's program, it's not administration.
Right. So, we'll keep an eye on that. Like I say, me and Emily and my Christine Natoli, who's our treasurer, we meet with her every few weeks just to, where are we at, where are we going, because that's a big number. If we go on to the next page, 12, occupational education. It's getting to be quite a bit. Next year, they're anticipating 25 children,
What do we have this year?
20.
These are not special ed, these are regular
No,
ed?
these are regular ed students. Oh, yeah, there are special ed
Yeah,
students.
but they're
in
not
here.
special education
But you
programs.
you can't put that as a
Right,
part, try to
right.
get reimbursement.
No,
for it.
I got it.
So we have 2 kids at P-Tech across the river. That's a program, it's an OCED program out of, is that Ulsterboses? Ulsterboses. It's a more of a technology-based type of program. And plus we've gone from 20 to 23 students, potentially. I will, Dr. Davenport is, I don't know if he's going, but I know they're going to be sending a cadre of students down to BOCES, I think beginning of February, so they can go look at the program, see if it's right for them. He'll have a real number around February 15th as to how many kids are really going to be in the program. But right now, he said budget for 23, plus I know I have the 2 across the river. So, as we move on, let's see. On page 13, computer-assisted instruction. I know this is a big player, but there's really not too much movement here. We pretty much are going to come in about the same. I think there's a little bit extra in BOCES for software and materials and supplies. That's about it. There's not a whole lot other than that. If we move on to the following page, on page 14, about 4 lines down, we have another retirement from last year, providing us some savings to the budget this year. So that's part of it. And then down in the health services, 2 places we have equipment in there at $4,000 in there. And I believe we'll be able to take care of all, and I'll have to sit down with Mr. Airstock, who's our Health and Wellness Coordinator. This is the AEDs. Some of them are coming to their end of their life, and a lot of them have no parts available. We did purchase a few of them already, and I know Dave is looking to purchase a couple more out of this year's money, but I don't think we will need money for next year. I think we have enough covered. And then we're reducing our health services from other districts by $4,000 because we have fewer private and parochial kids in other school districts anymore. Next page is not too much. I do want to go to page 16. At the very bottom, contract transportation. I have really just basically one line that's really getting me right now, and that's the second one from the bottom there, and that's transportation for our special education students. That's going up quite a bit. And I put unanticipated runs into there also. I am working with other school districts about trying to combine some of our runs together, especially working with Hyde Park, Red Hook, and Millbrook and Pine Plains. We're going to be looking together to see whether we can really combine things as we go through each of the towns, as we go to the various places for our students. If we go over to our next page, I'm just going to go over some of the highlights. As you know, in this section of employee benefits, I do have the RTA contract numbers in these numbers. But I'll talk about each of, well, not each of them, but some of them. The employee retirement system basically is remaining the same, okay? There is a decrease in the rate for the New York teacher retirement system. It's gone down to between 9.5 and 10.5. I budgeted 10.5. And if we get to 9.5, that would be some savings there. For Social Security, there is a little bit of an increase too, because you have the number of payrolls going up, so that, of course, is going to drive a little bit more. Plus, also, there's the FICA limit, and that goes up steadily. And I forgot, it's near about 120,000 now, so there's a little extra piece you got to pick up for those too. So it goes up a little bit more than just your salary increase. The other one being the health insurance. And health insurance, I currently have 15% as what I'm budgeting for DHIC. And so that kind of gives you an idea how much is in there above and beyond. Don't know where that's going to go yet.
We'll know that's the beginning of March, right?
Yes. I'll kind of get an idea in February where it's going, but it isn't really till March until we settle it. Below that, in the next section is debt service. Our debt service is decreasing by about $152,000, which is nice to see. And so we get to the last page and we're looking almost a $1.5 million increase over the prior year, which is 4.62%. Now, I provided a different backup for you in your books. It's not totally complete, but a lot of it is there. But you have various tabs in here for transportation, employee benefits, tuition students, enrollment. You have individual debt service where you can see some of the more of the detail as to where those numbers were generated from. But I will be providing other information as we go along with operation and maintenance and BOCE services. And staffing. I just wasn't quite right to have it in a publication for you guys yet, but I will try to have that in your the next time we meet, so we can then start to fill out the rest of the items. If we go back to the budget, we go over, the tax cap has not changed whatsoever. I have not changed anything about it, and really there's nothing I can do until we get state aid runs. That will make some adjustments at then. But right now, that doesn't change at all. We have a tax base growth factor of 1.48%, which is fantastic. I did estimate the allowable growth factor at 1.1. That number should be out within the next week or so. So we'll see what that looks like. So hopefully that will be even greater than the 1.1, which would be really nice. If we turn the page over, we're looking at a potential of a little over a 2% tax rate increase, or about $550,000.
Tax levy increase.
Tax levy increase,
Okay.
yeah, tax levy increase. Yeah, we're going to increase it with 550,000%. That wouldn't go over too high. So if we go over to the next page, and basically I did not make any changes to the revenue side of anything at this moment. I'm really just now waiting for state aid runs to be able to begin to forecast that.
Now, since the governor's not doing a state of the state this year, what's your expectation?
He's going to go from district to district with a bag of money in his trunk, and I don't know. I had heard that he was supposed, even with using a different format for his state of the state, that they were supposed to, I think I read in something from Council of School Superintendents, was that they were going to release state aid figures like within the next week or two, but I wouldn't take that to the bank, no pun intended.
Never done that.
I'm just saying that's what I'd heard through my sources. We'll see.
And if we go to the last page of it, we see a revenue shortfall of $964,000. About $30,000 higher than the rollover budget. So we have a lot more work to do, that's for sure. Any questions at this time? Or any feedback?
Yeah, now that you're not, I'm supposed to forget the acronyms. The thing that was restored last year.
Oh, gap elimination adjustment.
Right.
Yep.
So, where do you see that in the budget?
Well, it's not separated out. It is, if you go to the last page of that section, the first line, basic formula, that's where the gap elimination is. That's where the money was taken out of. It was taken out of that first code, 3101A, the basic formula. So, I'm anticipating, and what I did try to do is I put about a 2% increase in there. I don't know whether or not that's what will happen, but I'm kind of hoping that that's where we'll see it. Now, I didn't change anything about the BOCES at all, because that's, and the excess cost aid is, I increased it by about $50,000 just because we're just getting more kids, and that's, I think I'm a little lowballed there, but we'll sit down once we get our numbers all together as far as projecting what our aid will be for next year for that excess cost aid. Because remember, ours will not match up with the report that comes out. It will not match up. And the other two things on that page is trying to wean ourselves off of fund balance and debt service. It's just, we can't.
And you
It's
back
not
that off a little
realistic.
bit, right?
A little bit. So, you know, this, you know, hopefully things will help to reduce the gap, but I can't look at it and say there's a big pile of money sitting in there. Yeah, I can, you know, health insurance, even if it comes in at 10% instead of 15%. Okay, you saved $150,000. It's still not enough to bring it down to a point that's manageable. So this, we're going to have to look at staffing across the board. And unfortunately, and I've already begun to put that together. But it's not an easy thing. It's tough. I don't like doing it, but to balance the budget, we're going to have to look at it.
And again, I know we had this conversation last year, but this assumes that our goal, unless the board directs us otherwise, is to work on bringing this budget in to result in a tax levy that's within the tax levy cap. That's our goal. And we may have to make decisions at some point down the line here this spring that this is as good as we're able to do. Do we want to go to our community and ask for an you know, their support in exceeding the cap, or do we want to do, and there's any number of things we could do that won't, none of which will be popular, to say reduce staffing to bring it at or below that tax levy cap. So that's, again, that's the push and pull we've gone through the last several years, and we're going through it again, and we'll go through it until something changes with the tax levy cap. I mean, we saw this coming years ago, and we knew where it was going to go, and we're dealing with it, and we're certainly not alone.
There is one other area that could produce probably the most significant impact on this, and that is February 6th, and that's the number of potential retirees. That could have a significant impact. I forgot about that. That one will probably have the most significant, because the breakage is $50,000 to $60,000 on each teacher.
So we're not going to know that for another several weeks.
Any questions or anything else on the budget?
And again, stay tuned. We'll do what we always do, and that's give you updates as whenever we make a change to that. We'll be giving you like a one-pager. Here's what we changed from the last time we reported to you, and here's the bottom line, and just keep milking that thing for the next couple of months. Keep you posted.
Okay, we'll move on to board committee reports, and we'll start with school start time.
I've got the first one. Our December meeting, we invited the administrators from middle school, high school, and Brett, actually all our principals, and Mark Berg, to come share information with us about how they have found the change in start time. Mark Berg provided us with some data on the first quarter, and with some cautionary advice about how there are multiple variables that can contribute to data, but there is a slight uptick in attendance in grades 6 through 12 in the first quarter this year, but it's slight, you know. The tardies really were where we found some more interesting numbers. At the high school, it It's a marginal decrease in the number of kids that are arriving at or just beyond the first bell. In the middle school, however, there was much greater improvement in the number of kids arriving to school on time for the 8 o'clock start. Mark's promised to continue to collect data through the year so that we can continue to gauge how we're doing. He has reported more anecdotally that the day is going much more smoothly and less chaotic in the halls. Ed Davenport concurred, and in his informal polling of students, he's found no complaints. Students aren't arriving, as was feared, at 6:30 still in the morning. There are about 10 kids that are arriving about 7:15. Passing time is manageable, but not perfect, and we all had a little bit of a chuckle when Ed reported that, you know, they could be more diligent about getting to class. They don't have a lot of time for social detours, and when offered the opportunity for an escort, nobody is taking any administrator up on the opportunity. Mr. Kemnitzer said that the same goes for the middle school. The halls are quiet for the starting bell, which is incredible. And teachers are reporting that students seem to be more focused first period. He's had no complaints from parents about the change. It can be a little tricky for kids getting from the tech room to band or chorus, but teachers are pretty up to speed on who's trying to be diligent about getting there on time and who's not. There have been no concerns reported to Ed or John about sports schedules and club times, and we've asked for them to provide us participation numbers for those, since we had that data last year. For our initial presentations, we want to compare and see if there are more or less kids participating. At Chancellor, Brett was very pleased to announce that they have more enrichment, before and after school enrichment, than they've ever had before. Most of the kids are arriving for 8 o'clock, but some are arriving about 10 minutes early, which hasn't been a problem because I have an aide in the cafeteria.
Here for 9 o'clock.
I'm sorry, for 9 o'clock. There's an aide in the cafeteria if they arrive early, so there is supervision there. The biggest issue over at Chancellor was with the transportation. The exception of one bus in the beginning of the year, all of the morning buses were arriving at Chancellor by 8:50 for a 9 o'clock start. The afternoon was a little bit more problematic. It was a little tighter in the turnaround, as we've heard. Tom's made some adjustments in those bus runs, and as of the end of November, Brett reports that all buses are arriving on time by 3:20 for a 3:35 departure. He also reported that there was the necessity for adjustments to old routines, and with those adjustments and better communication, the afternoon departure is much more smooth. We produced our third school start time newsletter. It was emailed out to parents before the break and focused not only on our sort of plan for assessing the start time, but also safe driving for teens and how to help manage winter tiredness. Taking full advantage of those. Yes.
Are you getting any feedback from parents about the newsletters?
No, though the newsletters seem to promote emails about, this last email said something about we're going to vote on revoking or keeping the start time, and we got a flurry of emails from parents saying, don't revoke it, it's amazing, it's been great. But yeah, other than that.
One of the questions we're building into the survey that we're going to be doing is to ask parents if they've found that information to be helpful in any way.
And if there's anything else that we can inform them of.
Okay. So there's another report.
Yeah, part two.
Yeah, because we had 2 meetings.
So we met on January 4th, and as I alluded to earlier in the meeting, we came up with a timeline working back from a proposed April 4th Board of Education vote on the pilot program. We decided we would come to you all with our final presentation and recommendation at the March 21st board meeting. Of course, there are 3 courses of action that we might take. One is to keep the change if we've determined that the impact has been neutral to positive. Second, we could revert to the previous start time if there's some sort of compelling argument in favor of that. or third, push the time even later, which certainly we know some parents have asked for, but that probably wouldn't be the case unless other school districts in the area were prepared to shift their times later as well. We also did consider whether or not there was any budgetary impact with any of those scenarios, and we've determined that, at least to the best of our knowledge right now, there isn't. We have received emails, as we've already said, from parents. We're going to collect all of those. Each kind of unique communication will be cataloged. We got together our survey, which will be going out imminently, I guess, right, Tom? Our survey?
Soon.
Yes.
Yeah.
Soon. Yes. And we will administer a student survey based on that student sleep questionnaire that we first gave out last spring, thanks to Dr. Chatter Ariamontri, and those results will be collated in March. We will meet again with Personnel Services later in February. We hope to hear from Mr. Boucher about impact on sports schedules and athletic participation in the January 24th board meeting. And we have also tentatively scheduled focus group discussions with teachers in all the buildings to get their feedback. So we are covering all of our bases. We will come to you fully informed to make our recommendation, and we plan to meet again on February 24th.
Lisa?
For the students' survey, I remember last year we got some disparate results from the two surveys depending on how they were delivered.
Correct.
So
It's all paper. We're going to
Okay.
do all paper. I think that was the resolution.
And in classrooms?
Yes, and the principals will advise.
Yeah, I'm not sure what class they'll do it in, but.
Yeah. Seems the most uniform way to answer the survey.
Well, and the best way to get the results.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, good
It's a
question.
little more labor intensive on our end with having people have to input it, but I think the result's better, so.
I'd like to ask a question.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Yes.
It's up to the board president.
It's a matter of great interest to me. Because of the fan, I wasn't sure I heard you correctly, Laura, but did you say that tardiness was down in the middle school but unchanged in the high school?
Marginally changed. It is down in the middle school and marginally lower in the high school, but not a great margin.
You said there was no budget change from the start of that year.
No, it had to be budget neutral for any of this to happen, so.
Mr. Brunel, what do you attribute the fall in enrollment?
Fewer babies.
Families aren't having babies.
No babies.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
There's an irony there.
and we're even seeing, where, when I got here, we probably had about 80 students going to private and parochial schools. We were just transporting them. That's down to 30 to 40 kids. That's been cut in half, actually, too.
That dropped after the recession.
And if you look at the total population, the decrease has been even more. I mean, we've seen a lot here at the school, but overall, the entire town's, I'm gonna say student population, I guess the student population is down even more than just here, because there's 40 less kids going to private and parochial schools on top of that. Well, it's almost been cut in half.
It's a trend regionally.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Sure.
Yep.
All right, Personnel Committee.
That's me. The committee, we had the opportunity to participate in the online demo of the superintendent evaluation software that we are considering to use this year. Hopefully everybody's had an opportunity. Joe sent a link, so if you, hopefully everyone had the opportunity to look at that. I mean, the committee is fully supportive of trying this out this year. Like always, until we use it, we won't fully know its value, but everything that we saw on the demo, showed us that this would be a much more professional tool, much more efficient. And I think one of the biggest things, if we were to use even using a new tool, like a paper version the way we use now, Joe wouldn't really be able to provide evidence the way he could with this tool. It would kind of change the whole process. So, we'd like to move ahead with this unless anyone has any objections to that, we want to get started on that, because then Joe can start going, and wouldn't have to do everything at the end of the year, so unless there's any
Yeah, we're
objections.
pretty much poised to get rolling. In a normal, and this came up at our last discussion, in a normal evaluation cycle, we'd be starting this at the end of the summer after board goals and then superintendent's goals were developed. So we're late to the game because of the need to really study this and collect our information. So normally, if it's the consensus of the board to move forward, I would be doing over the next couple of months what I would normally be doing between September and March. And so this year I'll be doing it in January to March. So my time frame will be compressed just because we're getting into this a little late in the year. So I mean, if it works under the compressed time frame, it ought to be a breeze. If we continue to use it in another year and we're spreading it out over a full year and not kind of jamming it in, it really won't make much of a difference in terms of timeline for you as board members or for the board president, because you guys probably wouldn't start to dig into it anyway until March or April, and then you're doing your evaluations, and it's it's collating the data and presenting the data. So you won't notice much of a difference between year one and year two. The superintendent will notice a huge difference between year one and year two. But I think all in all, it's still worth the effort to give it a shot and see if it works well on the board side of it. The superintendent side of it shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, I mean, the big news was that it's BOCES aidable, so the cost to us after that would be around $1,000 per year, which is still...
It's not insignificant.
It's not insignificant, but much better than when we didn't know that was the case.
What was it without the aid?
Without the aid, what was it about?
It's about $1,800.
Yeah.
With the aid, the 46% aid,
yeah.
it's a little lower than 1,000. Just we get it in the next year, so if we use it this year, we'll get that BOCES aid next year.
And then the last thing, we started working on some of our questions for our meeting with David Shaw, which we would go over in executive session, just the questions we had at this point.
Okay, anything else for personnel? All right, move on to curriculum.
Those are mine. We spent our December meeting, Steve Jensen joined us talking about the middle school computer lab curriculum. You guys have all seen. Prior to the meeting, Marvin sort of compiled all the feedback that he'd received from the committee and some of the other board members. Generally, comments ranged from overarching impressions of the work to really particular lesson delivery choices. Steve Jensen wanted to reiterate the idea that there's a variation in skill level of the students coming up from the elementary school using technology, which the committee acknowledges, but also pointed out that it's our responsibility to address those variations. So we talked a lot about differentiation of lessons and how the BMS lab seems to be the perfect place for differentiation. And the draft presented doesn't really focus on that or address the idea of differentiation. So we've asked to see a range of options for solutions for differentiation, and if there is curricula from other schools that employ differentiation and what that looks like. Deirdre asked about the optimal timing to begin coding for kids, and Marvin sort of referred to the scope document as the being tied to the ISTE standards and the computer science standards, which should provide guidance on coding K through 12. That sort of led to discussion about the scope document, which is that big rubric. And there is tremendous focus put on two of the ISTE domains, empowered learner and digital citizenship, in that scope document, but scant information for the other 5 domains, which are knowledge constructor, innovative designer, computational thinker, creator and communicator, and global collaborator. And the committee is a little concerned that these are the tools that kids are going to need in the 21st century, and they need to understand how to use the technology available over multiple disciplines, and those other domains actually feed that education. So we've asked that maybe Lori Keating, our consultant, could work further with the team to develop more explicit benchmarks in those domains. In that scope document, they talk about mastery of knowledge, and we had a lengthy discussion about what mastery means. Cutting and pasting is a skill that can be mastered, but ethical behavior and analytical analysis are things that develop differently in different kids at different ages. So we were a little concerned that putting, the stamp of mastery on ethical behavior in 6th grade was a misnomer, and those concepts need to be revisited through their K-12 education. So Marvin's going to bring that back to the committee. He also asked that our discussions were so far-ranging. He asked us to sort of develop the essential questions around the curriculum and the scope document, which we did before the break. And he's going to take those essential questions back to the development team and further work through these documents and hopefully bring us something back. So we'll dig into it again at the end of January, we hope, if Marvin's been able to reconvene the team, and we'll let you know how it's going.
Lisa?
I wanted to ask you about the issue that Steve raised about variation in the skill level of students coming from the elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mean, that's not necessarily a concept that's peculiar to tech education. You could have it in reading and math skills too.
Mm-hmm.
So is there information that the team can use for those subject areas that would be applicable to addressing the issue on the tech side?
It's an interesting question. Those skills we were talking about really were how to save a document, how to access a C drive, how to, those kinds of real hard technology skills. We weren't really talking about differentiation more broadly, though those conversations have been happening across the curriculum. I know that the science classes and the math classes seem to be looking at different ways they can differentiate their classrooms. But in this particular conversation about differentiation, it was about skill level of kids. There are some kids that sit at home, have a computer, and they can code already. So what do you do with those kids when you're just introducing coding in a classroom?
Other questions? Okay, we'll move on to communications.
Okay, I think that's me. Well, we reflected on the work that this group did to support the capital project referendum and turn to set new agenda for our work moving forward, and that really is focusing pretty intensively now on the community roundtable. As we already discussed in relation to our board goals, that is our focus for opening conversation on Friday, February the 3rd, with representatives from PTSO, RSF, Culture Connect, and ENTA. We see this as the first stage of a progressively broader conversation, ultimately inviting many members of the community to participate. And right now, initially, some of the items we imagine we'll be discussing are things like changes in the town and village of Rhinebeck that are impacting the future of the district. As Tom pointed out, there are demographic changes going on in Rhinebeck that are much broader than just the number of children attending the schools. We will talk about economic growth, the housing market, rise of Airbnb properties in Rhinebeck, and an aging population. We'll think about how financial planning in the district is curtailed within the current tax cap environment, and of course begin to work with things such as what Tom shared with us tonight, patterns of enrollment and projections for the future. We see this as a kind of brainstorming session. We want to solicit input at this early stage and really try to hear out good ideas from those who are closest to our school first in terms of thinking about allocating resources. And we are really attuned to the fact that as the communication committee, a large part of our job is to communicate out through these different groups into our community about what is so strong in our school. For instance, the kind of information we heard tonight about the extraordinary education we offer in terms of inclusivity. Creating a pamphlet or brochure to highlight some of these factors is definitely on the radar for us. We're meeting again later this week on January 12th at 8 o'clock.
Questions? All right. Seeing none, we move on to good news. Any good news? Move on to old business.
There must be some, I just can't think of it.
A couple of things under old business, just to confirm. Steve Boucher will, our athletic director, will be giving his annual kind of state of the athletic program in Rhinebeck at our meeting on the 24th. So, we'll put him at the beginning of the agenda. And I did ask him specifically to address the issue of school start time and the impact, if any, positive or negative, on the program, which he indicates will be a very small part of his presentation, because he said it's really hasn't, that part of it's been seamless. But he'll report out, and if you have questions for him, he'll be glad to address those. Yes?
If you could, at some point before that, just whisper in his ear that we're really keen to hear if he has any thoughts about the impact and the board's goals on his program.
I'll ask him.
We won't be grading him, we'll just
Yeah.
like pictures of
Okay. Excuse me. The other thing I want to mention is, even though it's not part of our goals, at least specifically this year, we've already started to reach out to our legislators to set up opportunities to speak with them. We have a tentative date with Assemblyman Cahill on February 8th at 10 a.m. I'll send these to you. You don't have to remember these or write it down. But February 8th at 10 a.m. and with Senator Serino, February 2nd at 11 a.m. We have not gotten a response yet from Assemblyperson Barrett, but we anticipate getting a date from her shortly. So what that means two things. You'll need to let me know if you're available and interested, because I will need to bring a few of you with me at the very least, and they always ask how many people are coming, so I want to give them that information. And probably more importantly than that, we'll have to start talking about what our talking points are going to be when we go to speak with them. Tom and I had a discussion this afternoon about, and he'll elaborate in terms of some ideas that we can go to our legislators with, considering that the gap elimination adjustment is no longer a talking point. And while foundation aid may be a talking point, we already know that foundation aid, running the foundation aid formula is going to drive more money to less fiscally enabled school districts, and we're not in that camp, so that's not going to be a windfall for us. But we did talk about things like lobbying for adjustments to the excess cost aid, so that some of these special education costs, we might be able to recoup more aid, and that would be a way to help our bottom line given our program. But we still need to talk about it as at least maybe we can start that conversation in our communications committee meeting and set up an agenda, because February 2nd will be here before we know it. So last year we started early and they pushed us off until late February, early March. This year, we started early, and all of a sudden, they have earlier dates available, so we gotta go while we have a foot in the door, so. Well, that's all I have under old business for right now.
Any other old business? Okay. We have no public present, so we move on past public comment to other. Any other? Okay, seeing none, move on to action items.
Okay.
Is there anyone who would like to remove anything from the consent agenda? Okay, may I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to adopt the following resolution? Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby adopts its annual professional performance review, APPR, plan for classroom teachers and building principals covered under Education Law, Section 3012D for the 2016-17 school year and thereafter, as approved by the State Education Department, which shall remain in force and effect until such time as negotiable provisions of a subsequent APPR plan are agreed upon and approved by the Commissioner of Education.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept grant awards from the Rhinebeck Science Foundation in support of funding for the CLS STEM Fair as submitted by Ms. Allison Vaccarino and Mr. David Wolfen in the amount of $1,510, and for the third grade Bubble Trouble program as submitted by William Morrissey in the amount of $700 as stipulated.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? And once again, we thank the Rhinebeck Science Foundation for their generous support of our programs. All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the following permanent civil service appointments. Tina Myers, senior custodial worker, effective December 20th, 2016. Kyle Moore, custodial worker, effective December 20th, 2016. Stacy Stoliker, senior typist, effective January 3rd, 2017. Rachel Rinaldi, typist, effective January 3rd, 2017.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the following, approve the appointment of Rosita Castellanos to the civil service position of food service helper assigned to the Bulkley Middle School cafeteria effective January 11th, 2017 at step 1, $11.90 per hour for a 4-hour day with a 26-week probationary period.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the list of additional emergency conditional substitute teachers and substitute non-instructional staff for the 2016-17 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to modify the probationary appointment of Charles Johnson to the 1.0 FTE position of technology teacher assigned to the Bulkley Middle School and the Rhinebeck High School in the Industrial Arts General Tenure Area at a salary of Step 1 MA, $58,482 in accordance with the RTA salary schedule for 2016-17 from 4 years to 3 years effective September 12, 2016.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve additional Rhinebeck High School activity advisors for 2016-17 as attached.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve spring coaches for the 2016-17 school year. Lacrosse junior varsity offense, Andrew Hettinger, $2,837. Junior varsity defense and goal, Jan Bonanza, $2,837. Softball varsity, Scott Stuyvesant, $3,886.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve a leave request under the Family and Medical Leave Act of Jennifer Ramo to commence on or about May 9th, 2017, with such leave to be taken as paid medical leave through the period of disability as certified by a physician in writing, to the extent of her accrued sick leave, and thereafter such leave to be taken as unpaid child care leave through the conclusion of the 2016-17 school year.
So moved.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the following resolution. Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby transfers Donna Shellhammer from the civil service position of clerk to the position of typist 10-month, effective September 1st, 2016, at a salary of step 11, $37,745, as the result of a desk audit conducted by the Dutchess County personnel, reclassifying her position from clerk to typist.
So moved.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept two 2017 ExxonMobil Fuels Educational Alliance grants in the amount of $500 each for the Rhinebeck High School and Bulkley Middle School for the maintenance and support in the area of math and/or science through the sponsorship of Mr. Richard Matthews and Rhinebeck Mobile.
So moved.
Any discussion? And again, we thank Mr. Matthews for his generous sponsorship of the grants. All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept a grant award of $500 from the Reformed Protestant Church, Dutch Church of Rhinebeck Flats, Inc., to the 2016 RHS BMS Nurses Fund.
So moved.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. And thank you to the Reformed Church. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept the following donations for the support of the Rhinebeck High School Model United Nations Club trip to the 2017 Nobel Peace Laureate Summit in Bogota, Colombia, $270 from the Oregon Jewish Community Foundation, $12,000 from the Sunshine Comes First Limited, and $500 from the Louis August Jonas Foundation, Incorporated.
So moved.
Any discussion? And we thank our generous donors to the Model UN Club as well. All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. Okay. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the following bond resolution authorizing not to exceed $12,089,160 aggregate principal amount of serial general obligation bonds to finance reconstruction of various district buildings at a maximum cost of $12,089,160, levy of tax and annual installments and payment thereof, the expenditure of such sum for such purpose, and determining other matters in connection therewith.
And the rest of it is the rest of this verbiage, which the record will show you've
That's good.
approved or not, depending on how you vote.
Don't have to read it all.
Thank you for saving me from reading.
I was feeling badly. Me too.
I gave Mark the official dispensation in the interest of time.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Oh, really?
All right.
Okay.
A roll call.
That's a
Do you need
special-
our signatures too?
No, don't need,
I have the document.
Do you want to say the
but-
names?
no, it doesn't need signatures, but need to have individual.
All right,
And needed to have at least five.
at least 2/3, yeah, at least 5
2/3,
people,
that's
so
fine.
we're okay.
We're good.
We got it, we got it. Hey, your name.
Yay.
Hey.
I don't know if you can accept that.
Yay?
Yay.
Okay, that's unanimous. That motion passes.
Yay.
Yay.
If you want to, you can read it again in the newspapers. We got to publish it in the newspapers now.
Yes. Yes.
And there is no executive session, correct?
Yeah, there is.
Okay.
Oh.
Sorry.
Like,
We could have read the entire,
I know.
sorry.
So this is for the discussion of
Negotiations.
contract negotiations
Correct.
with our teachers bargaining unit.
Correct.
Do we have a motion to move into executive session?
Oh, so moved.
All those in favor? That's unanimous. We're moving into executive session.
Checked out, sorry.
Okay.